I've watched is no group of gatekeepers or whistleblower protectors or journalistic, ethics guardians have defended you on First Amendment grounds, which is pretty shocking. But the question has always been, why are the feds so intent on taking you out? And here's my theory. So the summer of 2001, you go on TV, time-stamped, and say someone's going to fly planes into the World Trade Centers. They're going to blame Osama bin Laden, call the Bush White House, warn them. You basically called 9/11 in detail. You're the only one who did. And we can prove that. It's not a guess. We have the tape. I've played the tape. 9/11 happens in September. There's a 9/11 commission immediately impaneled. They go and interview a bunch of people in the U.S. government and outside and ask, were there signs that this was happening? They don't interview you. You're the one guy who predicted it in public. You're the only guy who predicted it in public, and no one calls you to ask, how the hell did you know that? Which is the obvious question. Then they set about trying to destroy you. Rather than hailing you as a prophet or at least asking the question, how the hell did Alex Jones know in detail this was coming? How did you know? They never even ask you. And then they mobilized DOJ and FBI against you. And I think there's a connection between those two facts.
Well, there certainly is. I'd already been researching false flag attacks, not just by our government, but other governments throughout history. The Gulf of Tonkin to get us into Vietnam in '64 that was later declassified to have been staged. And, of course, the USS Liberty between Israel and the Lyndon Baines Johnson administration wanted to get us into full war with Egypt, but the ship survived, became the most decorated ship in U.S. history because of the valiance of the crew. And Operation Ajax, where the CIA and Kermit Roosevelt in '53 overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh, who was a reformist and really pro-West, but he wouldn't give them all the oil. And they used radical Islamists to overthrow him and then put the Shah in and then overthrew the Shah. Over and over again, there's just hundreds and hundreds of historical real case examples of that being done by our government and other governments. And I saw a lot of pre-programming in the news. Osama bin Laden's going to get us. When he gets us, we need to give up all of our rights and it'll be a new America and we've got to set up this police state. So I saw a lot of pre-programming.
But you called the specifics. You called the specifics of 9/11. I just can't get past that. And I've asked you in public and private, how did you do that? I've never gotten really a straight answer. I doubt I will now. But the fact remains, the incontrovertible fact, the provable fact that you called it, and then they began a campaign against you. And it's not because you're a racist. You've never been a racist or an anti-Semite or a crazy person, actually. You've never spewed hate. But you have, for 30 years, said the foundations of our system are actually kind of fake and rotten. But it was 9/11. That's when they really decided this guy has to be stopped and just basically eliminated the First Amendment to stop you.
Well, just to be clear, it's not that I'm dodging how I knew it. That was 24 years ago, and I remember what I was covering and what I was doing at the time. And everybody's seen the July 25th, where I went into detail, but actually my crew using ChatGPT, scanning through all my old shows, found shows in April and even before that in March, where I get more specific. And I said the CIA is going to fly planes into the World Trade Centers and blame it on bin Laden.
So I just think that's the most amazing fact I've ever heard in my entire life, that you called that. And we can prove it because it's on tape with timestamps. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, okay, Alex Jones is crazy. I hate her. Okay, whatever. I don't think that's true. But you called 9/11. And no investigator ever called you to ask you how you called that? How you knew that? Not one.
No.
No one from DOJ. Philip Zelikow of the 9/11 Commission never called you.
No.
Why?
Obviously because certain segments of our intelligence agencies with other foreign intelligence agencies were tracking the supposed hijackers. They were being trained at U.S. military bases. They were being given government money from our government and other governments. They were being protected. Then 2 of their magic passports and all that rubble and hundreds of millions of pieces of paper were found the next day to then connect them to it. It was all laid out. Then the bin Laden family was flown out of the country in the days after, and that was basically shut down in the news, even though it was covered some locally here in Florida. So I knew that bin Laden had been CIA going back to really the Mujahideen being set up by Zbigniew Brzezinski and Jimmy Carter, and then Reagan took that over. And then they kind of build that as blowback. But even recently, you've seen the U.S. aid information and other documents come out in the Institute for Peace where they're directly paying massive amounts of money to Taliban, to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS, even in the last few years.
Oh, yeah.
And they use them as these proxy armies. So that was well known in the research circles that bin Laden was basically a multinational cutout used by Western intelligence agencies to destabilize areas, but also be a boogeyman. Then you see CNN in a mountain cave magically being able to find him, but the U.S. can't kill him and nobody else can. And I knew that CNN is literally the CIA broadcasting system.
For sure.
Total Mockingbird, thoroughbred. And there were hundreds and hundreds of points that went in, but okay, bin Laden's worked for the CIA. And you got CNN interviewing him, and they're all scaring us, saying he's about to attack us. And then I remembered how Ahmad Salam, who was an Egyptian intelligence agency operative working for the FBI and CIA, was hired to build a bomb in the early 90s to blow up the World Trade Center. But then when they said build a real bomb, he started recording them because he sort of figured out it was a setup. And then he had that press conference where he played it, and I interviewed him a few times, where the FBI said, no, just go ahead and let it go forward. And so you start adding all that together. They'd already tried to hit the World Trade Center before. The World Trade Center had a lot of issues in it with asbestos and also some of the structural issues. So they were already wanting to have a plan to get rid of it. And then you have the CIA and FBI in the Solomon Brothers building, Building 7, the 47-story skyscraper. You have that right next door. So I looked at all of it, and I thought, where would the new Pearl Harbor be? And the year before, in the Project for American Century, headed up by Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney wrote in there that we need a new Pearl Harbor event to launch the Pax Americana, but it wasn't an American empire of freedom and liberty and justice like Trump's trying to, launch. It was a globalist empire of military enforcement and tyranny. And so there was a lot of other data points that went into it. Cheney also writes in that same document, we need to look at race-specific bioweapons to have control and bring in our power, and that was actually picked up in the newspapers.
Okay, so these are not minor issues. These are like the biggest things happening in the world, the most important things happening in the world, and the end of one system, ushering in of a new system. Millions in the end died because of all of this, millions. And you're on like cable access in Texas, figuring this out. Like, where is everybody else? I don't understand. Like, I worked at CNN at the time. And we had as you said, Peter Bergen went and interviewed bin Laden. I'm not attacking Peter Bergen, but like, how come you were the only one who figured this out?
Yeah, by that time, I started out in 94 as a guest on Access TV and had my own show by 95, but I was on local talk radio. I just started getting, I've been syndicated a few years then, but I mean, you're right. I was on Access TV as well. And that's where
you were like way out on the fringe. And all the people at the very center of our business, journalism, like they didn't see or didn't talk publicly about any of this, none of this.
Well, I saw Gary Hart on with another guest.
Gary Hart, the former presidential candidate, senator from Colorado.
I think it was the Hart-Rubin Commission.
Yeah.
I saw him in Congress with testimony earlier that year, and also saw him on, I believe it was CNN, or maybe it was Chris Matthews, MSNBC, but the clip's famous. And they say the world's about to change. There's about to be big things happening, big attacks.
When was this?
It was in early July.
It was before 9/11.
Yes, and they were very specific. Somebody should find that clip, can crowdsource that. And that was the final catalyst, because they were basically telling the establishment, very thinly veiled, what was about to go on. So I sat back, I looked at it, and I thought years later, how did I come up with that? Because I don't just say a bunch of stuff, then most of it doesn't come true. I'm very specific on predictions, and almost all of them have come true. I thought that it was the spinoff of the X-Files, and I wasn't even an X-Files fan, rarely watched it, called The Lone Gunman, that it turns out had come out in the spring of 2001 that I didn't even learn about, because there wasn't, Facebook and Twitter and X back then. So if you didn't watch those entertainment shows, you didn't know about it. And then 6 months or so after 9/11, listeners start saying, have you seen this? And I had listeners send me VHS recordings off Fox TV of this episode where a criminal group in the U.S. government hijacks a jumbo jet in New York to fly it in the World Trade Center to blame it on a Central Asian terrorist so that they have a pretext to take it over domestically with a police state and launch wars in the Middle East.
Wait, this was on the X-Files?
Yes, this was on the X-Files. And so later I thought maybe I got it from that. But then we found tapes even earlier, a month before that came out, where I had put it together on the radio. But here's what's crazy. Then I got reached out by some of the hosts of the X-Files saying, hey, Chris Carter told us that the CIA came to him with the plot of this and asked him some of the scripts that they would ask him as a favor to put this in as a TV program. And then later I corresponded with Chris Carter via email. He talked about this in the news, like in entertainment publications, about, Alex Jones is a really good guy. And when they rebooted in 2016 again, he talked about the talk show host characters based on me. So I've talked to him, some of his crew, but he said, no, I don't know why the CIA, you used to interview him, came to me and said, here's the script for this show. So it wasn't just Alex Jones saying that a government agency was going to hijack a jet and fly the World Trade Center. The X-Files spinoff, The Lone Gunman, one of its main episodes was about that specific story.
This is just crazy. So I often get, people I know saying,
and they remote control and hijack the jet, the good guys, and keep it from crashing the World Trade Center. So why would the CIA come to Chris Carter and say, we want you to write this, and then it's released months and months before 9/11? So I'm not the only one. It was in the collective unconsciousness. I don't know. But I said 2 weeks before they shot Trump in Butler, I went on air and I said they're going to try to shoot him at a rally. That's obvious to see how desperate they were, how the lawfare didn't work. A lot of this is just studying how they operate. But so much of it now is John Podesta in August 2020, the New York Times wrote about it, had a big war game with the top Democrats. And they said if Trump wins, if they weren't able to steal it, in my view, then we're going to have civil war conditions. We're going to have blue states secede, blue cities, and we're going to use social issues to foment a rebellion that we're going to basically frame as racial, George Floyd on steroids, 10.0, and then we're going to drive Trump from office. Well, they were able to steal it, in my view. The evidence I think is overwhelming. So they didn't use that plan. Well, they started talking about that plan again in the months before this last election last year. So much of what I'm able to predict isn't really prediction. They admit it. The UN said for 20 years, we're going to use Disease X to bring in a global system, a global central bank digital currency, a global social credit score, a global vaccine ID that will be used as the global internet ID, global taxation ID. That's official Bill Gates, the UN, all these big bodies preparing how they'd roll this out. You have the Rockefeller Foundation with Operation Lockstep 2010, 2011, describing locking down the sports stadiums, locking your houses 6 feet apart, wearing masks for fear. Then Bush, George W. had that in the BioShield program that passed in 2005, where they sent out kits, millions of them to everybody, and to the Red Cross with the 6 feet apart, with the mask, with all the stuff. But they didn't launch the bio attack scare that they had, I think, locked and loaded. Then they waited till 2020.
So you're just taking them at their word. You're doing what I don't do enough, which is listen to people I disagree with and sincerely try to assess what they're saying.
Fauci just said last week, a much worse, way higher morbidity. It's respiratory, it's coming. And you got Hotez, oh, don't worry, Trump's going to have a big problem. It's going to come crashing in on him. We'll see how he tries to reboot the economy. And then you learn Fauci and all of them are involved with Obama and Chapel Hill in North Carolina creating COVID-19. It was a big scandal, 2015, gain of function, SARS. And then they move it to Wuhan to plausible deniability so they can kind of blame the Chinese if they want. I'm not saying the Chinese are good. The Communist Chinese are terrible. And it was kind of a joint project. And then they roll it out. Then they've got their so-called shot that's mRNA. This stuff is all very well planned. And so when you see him up there lying going, no, Senator Paul, it is you that is wrong. No gain of function. Then it's in all his emails. This is gain of function. And he has public symposiums in defense of gain of function. He's Mr. Gain of Function. If he was a superhero, he would just, have gain of function on his chest and the back of his cape. And then he's like, I don't know anything about that. And so, these guys just treat us like children. And so they kept saying, we're going to use a virus, we're going to use a scare to bring in our global government. I remember Lou Dobbs in Judicial Watch 2006 sued to get North American Union documents. And in it, they're meeting up in Banff, Canada, and they're like, we're going to use collapsing migration flow from a virus to flood the West and use that crisis to bring in a new Marshall Plan. We're going to use a disease X to, finally get the world to accept this global government. So they're just scheming constantly. They have Event 201.
But in public.
In public. They have the SPARS war game 2025, 2028 that came out a few years before 2020 in the viral release that is actually set in 2020 to 2024. And it rolls out how they're all going to do it. The tweets that are in there are almost word for word. They just changed the name SPARS to COVID-19. So it's a blueprint. And then if they get caught, it's not a viral attack plan. It's just a war game. But the war game matches the exact rollout of the attack, so they're all on script.
So in a normal world that rewarded, excellence and prescience, you'd be a billionaire because of your predictive powers. I mean, huge companies, governments hire people who can piece together fragments of evidence to create an accurate picture of the future. That's a huge business. I know a lot of people in that business. George Friedman, guys like that, really, really smart people. But you've got the best track record of all. And I think it's so telling that rather than reward you for this or call you up and be like, Alex Jones, you're like, what do you think's coming next? They're like, no, we must eliminate our own First Amendment to destroy your life, which is what they've done. That seems like a pretty clear indicator of their guilt to me.
Well, what they don't want is compartmentalize good people in industry and government, not just here but around the world, to listen to what I'm saying, go check it out for themselves, find out everything I just said is on record. Anybody can just type in anything I said, and it's from their own documents. And then people will basically put the glasses on like they live and see it for themselves. I'm not telling them what to see like the corporate media does, brainwashing people and selling them a lie that two men can have a baby and there's no X and Y chromosomes and communism's great and open borders are wonderful. No, I mean, I'm simply saying see this for yourself. I liken it to those hidden image paintings. And when you first can't see the hidden image, you're like, I can't see. Once you do see it, you can't unsee it. So I'm only trying to get people to go look at what I'm pointing out and find out. I liken this whole thing to you have the adult table with the CFR and the Club of Rome, the WF and the UN, and the think tanks, the RAND Corporation, and they're at the adult table at Thanksgiving, and the general public and even a lot of the politicians are compartmentalized and naive. We're over at the kids' table, and we'd actually listen to what the adult table, because that's their arrogance. They admit 99% of this in their own battle plans, as if we are too lazy or stupid to ever go look at it. And that's part of a confidence game they have with their own people, their own corporate intelligence operatives, their own government intelligence operatives, their own networks, where they just basically admit all this stuff out in the open. I mean, it's like, Mudd from the CIA on CNN saying, Foggy Bottom's going to kill this guy. We're going to kill Trump. And then Trump had called me, this is back in his first administration. I said, listen, you need to watch out. They've got Phil Mudd and all these other guys on CNN, MSNBC saying they're going to kill you. And he goes, just a moment. He goes, I'm going to have the Secret Service call you. In about an hour, they call and they go, what's going on, Alex? Trump told us to call you. And I said, you don't know about this. So he goes, okay, here's our email. And I sent the Secret Service this, as if the Secret Service doesn't know they were all over TV saying we're going to kill Trump. So
it's
I mean,
possible they caught that, yeah.
Yeah, and then Trump didn't catch it. So I mean, now they're everywhere. You've got this new Rutgers study out where 55% of Democrats, liberals, are asked, do you support Trump being killed? They're like, yes, we want him dead. He should be assassinated. This is this week, and came out over the weekend. And they asked him, so do you see yourself as part of a assassination culture? And they said yes. So, but then if you say, the Democrats are fomenting violence, I mean, The View says all the time, he's killing people. Elon's killing people. They don't say how. They're stealing your Social Security. They're killing old ladies. And so we need to be ready to fight and die to take this guy out. Those are quotes. And then they just sit back and go, oh, no. We're not calling for violence with Crockett and all of them, but they're not going to do it. They want lone nuts to do it because their other wind-up operatives like Crooks and the other guy here in Florida failed. But, I mean, they are crazy. And if the establishment, or what's left of it, it's falling apart, thinks killing Trump is going to help them, they're delusional, because if you look at all the scenarios that come out of that, it's much worse for them.
No, I agree. I absolutely agree with that.
Not all sleep aids are made by pharmaceutical companies. You probably heard about 8 Sleep by now. They develop the country's most innovative products for sleep. Almost everybody in our office uses something they make called the pod, and they love it. And there's a reason that professional athletes and lots of other smart people do too. You add the pod to your mattress like a mattress cover, and it helps you get a better night's sleep and fill with vitality at the start of each day, in an intimidating way almost. It's amazing. How does it do it? Well, it uses advanced technology to track your sleep and automatically adjust the temperature of your side of the bed to what's perfect for sleep, and temperature makes all the difference. It's backed by over 600 million hours of data. They've also used those insights to create their new product, Sleep Elixir, to help you get quiet before you go to bed, fall asleep faster, and stay knocked out longer. No grogginess, no weird side effects, just better deep sleep. So if you're ready to take sleep and recovery to the next level, go to 8sleep.com/Tucker to get $350 off your Pod 4 Ultra full refund for 30 days if you don't love it. It works.
Before I ask you what you think the signs are pointing to now, like what are your predictions for the next 5 years? And then I ask you how your battles with the U.S. government are going in its attempts to silence you. How do you, like, if you have this ability, which you do, I'm not sucking up, it's just, again, it's provable, to put together a picture, an extraordinarily accurate picture of what the future holds, like, what does that do to you? How do you sleep and how do you live? And, like, why haven't you totally destroyed yourself? Like, that's not, those are kind of not thoughts that most people, including me, are burdened with and don't really want to be burdened with. But, like, how do you turn off the visions of the future in your head?
Well, I mean, I appreciate you saying nice things about me, and obviously God gives us all different gifts, and I do have some gifts. But I think a lot more people have these gifts than really realize it.
But you can prove it. That's why I've obviously we're friends, and I like you as a man. But you can prove it in a way that others can't because it's on tape. So it's not really debate. Has Alex Jones had, more accurate predictions of the future than any living person in the world that I know of? We can prove that. We don't have to argue about it. I've got the freaking tape. So again, it's not even a compliment. It's just an observation. And I don't know why I seem to be the only person who's obsessed with this. Like, how did this guy predict this? No, everyone's like, oh, he's crazy. Okay, maybe he's crazy, but he predicted this. So my question is, like, what does that do to you?
I mean, it is stressful, the responsibility of constantly researching and looking at all, culture, pop culture. That's where a lot of the real brainwashing's at. That's where a lot of the predictive programming and manipulation goes on.
Yes.
But also in so-called news. But I mean, I did get to where I drank way too much, ate too much, got really unhealthy because I could, go home at night and have some drinks and, and eat half a key lime pie and just kind of dial out and forget about reality. But things have gotten so intense and so dangerous that for about the last 9 months, I haven't drank and I've been exercising every day and I've lost 63 pounds and I feel great. And I've just embraced the responsibility. Plus, we're alive right now, really in the Great Awakening, where more and more people are piecing things together and deciding to really get informed and engaged. And so I've always said I want to become obsolete, where people really start understanding how the world really works to such an extent that there are so many other journalists and researchers and pundits and just private citizens and people in business and academia and life and in the ecclesiastical circles, that they really realize that this globalist system is transhumanist, it is evil, it is a spiritual battle at the end of the day, and people need to really choose a side. And so I think choosing the side and saying, hey, God, I can't do this, I'm weak, I'm imperfect, but through you I can, and really praying and asking God to lead, God, and direct you and give you discernment. So to really answer your question, I'll have all this data and this research, and so that my feeble human mind can understand really what God tells me. And then it's that final little ingredient of being sure about something, that's what they're intending to do. But we have real agency. Good has more power than evil. They always say the devil's greatest trick was convincing the world that he didn't exist. I think that's his second biggest trick, is that he doesn't exist, and he does. His biggest trick is convincing people that there is no good out there, and that there's not.
That's right.
And that God doesn't exist. So, for me, so much of it again is in the old days, the globalists, the Western propaganda after the end of World War II, and since then, when we won World War II, had pretty much total narrative control. And so anything they were pre-programming and preparing and hyping the people for, they pretty much always got what they wanted. So it was easy to follow those trend lines out and see what the probable main scenarios were. And then things would almost always come true that I predicted because they were still in charge. Now that the globalists are really collapsing and a new international order and system is forming, coming from the grassroots up, politics is downstream from the grassroots, and because Trump is such a chaos bringer to their system, which is good, but with it also comes danger. But it's better than living, on our knees and then ending up having our souls basically taken. It's better to fight down our feet. But in my experience,